There's a dating crisis nobody's naming. The most psychologically aware, emotionally mature, deeply conscious people, the ones who've done years of inner work, can't find partners. Not because they're too picky, not because they're commitment phobic. They're becoming undateable for a reason Carl Jung predicted. The more conscious you become, the smaller your dating pool becomes. Not theoretically smaller, mathematically, energetically, psychologically impossible smaller. And it gets worse. The very things that make you attractive in theory, emotional intelligence, self-awareness, authenticity, make you incompatible with 99% of potential partners in practice. Jung discovered why conscious people are facing what he called the loneliness of individuation, where the more whole you become, the more alone you are. Why every date feels like speaking different languages. Why every connection that looks promising on paper dies the moment it gets deep. If you've done the work, integrated your shadow, become emotionally available, and you're still single, Jung would say, the problem isn't you. It's that you've outgrown the level where most people operate in relationships. Here's Jung's brutal truth about relationships. Most people don't want partners. They want mirrors for their projections, containers for their shadows, and actors for their unconscious scripts. And they have no idea that's what they're doing. Before you became conscious, you could participate in this unconscious relationship dance. You'd meet someone, project your anima or animus onto them, mistake projection for connection, and enter a relationship that was actually two people's unconscious patterns interacting while their conscious selves watched through a fog. It felt like love, because neither person was awake enough to see what was really happening. But once you've done deep psychological work, once you've withdrawn your projections, integrated your shadow, and individuated toward yourself, you can't unsee the machinery. You go on dates and you're watching the other person project onto you in real time. You feel them trying to stuff you into their mother wound or father complex. You recognize their attraction as their anima projection before they even realize they're projecting. Jung experienced this personally. After his individuation, he found that most people couldn't actually see him. They saw their projections of what a psychiatrist, guru, or father figure should be. Real intimacy became nearly impossible because it required the other person to also be conscious enough to withdraw their projections and meet him as an actual person. This is why conscious people are staying single, not from fear of intimacy, but from exhaustion with projection. Every potential relationship reveals itself as two unconscious patterns seeking to perpetuate themselves, and only you're aware enough to see it happening. Jung discovered that most of what people call chemistry is just projection compatibility, how well your unconscious patterns match their unconscious needs. And when you've withdrawn your projections, that chemistry disappears. Here's how projection works in dating. You meet someone. Your unconscious immediately scans them for how well they match your unresolved parental complexes, your shadow material, your idealized images. If there's a match, your psyche floods with attraction chemicals. You call this spark or connection. It's actually your unconscious recognizing a familiar wound pattern. For unconscious people, this feels magical, and they pursue it. For conscious people, it feels like watching a psychological puppet show where you're supposed to play along, but you can see all the strings. Jung had a patient, a woman who'd spent 5 years in analysis integrating her father complex. She described the moment she became undateable. I went on a date with a man I would have found wildly attractive before my work with you. Powerful, distant, emotionally unavailable. My father, exactly. But now, sitting across from him, All I could see was my old wound trying to recreate itself. The chemistry I would have felt was just my unintegrated complex recognizing its match. I had no attraction because I had no projection. She wasn't damaged by her inner work. She was freed from unconscious repetition. But that freedom eliminated 90% of her potential partners, because 90% of attraction is projection-based. This is what conscious people face. They can spot projection immediately. When someone is attracted to them, they can feel whether it's attraction to their actual self or to what the person is projecting onto them. And once you can feel that difference, accepting projection-based attraction feels like being loved for someone you're not. You'll ghost people who seem perfect on paper because you can sense them falling in love with their projection rather than with you. You'll end promising relationships because underneath the surface compatibility, you recognize unconscious patterns trying to play out. You're not being picky, you're being conscious, and consciousness eliminates most of what passes for connection. But here's the deeper problem Jung identified. Even when you meet another conscious person who also doesn't project, someone who sees you clearly, you both might lack that addictive spark unconscious people mistake for chemistry. Real connection without projection feels calm, clear, almost boring compared to the high of projection-based attraction. So, you face an impossible choice. Unconscious partners who offer exciting projection-based chemistry, but no real intimacy, or conscious partners who offer real seeing, but none of the addictive intensity unconscious people call passion. Jung's second insight destroys most relationships. When you integrate your shadow, you become both more whole and more alone, because integrated shadow makes you undateable to anyone still projecting theirs. Before shadow work, you could bond through mutual shadow projection. You'd both project your darkness onto the same targets, that political party, that type of person, that behavior you both agreed was bad. This created pseudo-intimacy. We hate the same things. We must be compatible. But once you've integrated your shadow, you can't do this anymore. You've acknowledged your capacity for the darkness you used to project. You've owned the traits you used to hunt in others. You can't bond through shared shadow projection because you're not projecting your shadow anymore. Jung noticed this pattern repeatedly. His patients who did deep shadow work would report that their relationships fell apart not from conflict, but from the loss of shadow-based bonding. Couples who'd stayed together through shared projections, both blaming parents, hating the same people, fighting the same enemies, discovered they had nothing in common once they stopped projecting. One man, a journalist who'd integrated his shadow through Jungian analysis, described dating after shadow work. I took a woman to dinner. Within 20 minutes, she was ranting about her ex, her boss, her mother, projecting her shadow onto everyone in her life. Before my work, I would have bonded with her through commiseration. Now, I just felt sad watching her attack herself through others. There was no second date, not because she was bad, but because I couldn't participate in unconscious shadow projection anymore. He wasn't judging her, he was recognizing incompatibility. His shadow was integrated, hers was projected. They were operating from different psychological levels, and neither was wrong. They were just impossible matches. This is the shadow integration paradox. The work that makes you psychologically healthy makes you romantically incompatible with most people. Because most bonding is shadow-based. Most "we're so similar" is really, we project our shadows onto the same targets. Most "you get me" means you hate what I hate. When you stop projecting shadow, you lose access to the primary bonding mechanism of unconscious relationships. You can't hate bond. You can't trauma bond through shared wounds. You can't create intimacy through mutual projections. What you thought would make you more available for love actually makes you unavailable for unconscious connection. And here's what makes it worse. People with unintegrated shadows are attracted to your integration. They sense your wholeness and want to merge with it to avoid their own shadow work. But you can feel them using you as a shadow container. They're not attracted to you. They're attracted to outsourcing their shadow work to your integration. So you become undateable from both sides. You can't date people who project their shadow because you can't participate unconsciously anymore. And you can't date people attracted to your integration because they're not seeking you. They're seeking to avoid their own work. Jung identified another relationship killer. Once you've individuated toward your authentic self, you can't perform the dating persona anymore. And dating requires nothing but persona performance. Think about what dating demands: curated photos presenting your best angles, conversations performing your most interesting self, behavior showcasing your relationship-worthy traits, strategic revelation timing, not too vulnerable too fast, but authentic enough to seem genuine. It's persona theater from first swipe to 50th date. For people still identified with their persona, this feels normal. For someone who's found their authentic self through individuation, it feels like psychological death. Every dating interaction requires betraying the self you worked years to discover. Jung saw this with his patients constantly. They'd individuate, find their authentic core, then try to date and realize they couldn't. Not because they were damaged, but because dating required reconstructing the persona they'd just deconstructed. One woman, a lawyer who'd undergone profound individuation, described the impossibility. I'd spent 3 years in analysis stripping away my personas, the successful woman, the perfect daughter, all the masks I thought were me. I found my actual self underneath. Then I tried online dating and realized every interaction required resurrecting those dead personas. The successful together woman who has her life figured out. I couldn't do it. That person doesn't exist anymore. But my authentic self, messy, deep, real, doesn't translate to dating apps. She wasn't failing at dating. She was succeeding at authenticity. And that success made dating impossible. Here's the brutal mechanism Jung identified. Dating selects for people who can perform personas convincingly. The best daters are the most skilled persona performers. So, as an individuated person, you're automatically incompatible with people who succeed at dating because their success comes from the very persona performance you've transcended. This creates a paradox. The people most available on dating apps are the least available for real relationship. They've mastered persona performance, which means they're furthest from their authentic self. The people who could actually meet you as real selves are the ones who've also abandoned dating because they can't perform anymore. But it gets worse. Even when you try to be authentic while dating, people experience your authenticity as either too much too soon or not enough of what they expect. Your depth reads as intensity. Your realness reads as weirdness. Your authenticity triggers people's defenses because it highlights their falseness. Jung noticed that individuated people unconsciously make others uncomfortable simply by being authentic, not from aggression, but from presence. Their realness creates pressure on others' personas, and people respond by either attacking the authenticity or withdrawing from it. So dating becomes impossible. Perform your persona and betray yourself, or be authentic and trigger everyone's defenses. Stay false and hate yourself, or be real and stay alone. If you're recognizing these patterns, seeing through projection when everyone else calls it chemistry, unable to bond through shadow projection anymore, feeling your authentic self suffocate under dating's persona demands. You're not broken. You're awakening to a deeper level of relating that most people never reach. The loneliness you feel isn't rejection, it's transition. You're between the unconscious love you've outgrown and the conscious intimacy you haven't found yet. This gap is painful, but it's proof you're evolving, not failing. Before we explore how to navigate this impossible landscape, check out our new guide, True Self-Discovery, with 24 practical reflection exercises designed to help you find your way within. Click below to get True Self-Discovery. Let's continue, because what Jung discovered about energy and intimacy changes everything. Here's what Jung understood that explains the chronic exhaustion conscious people feel while dating. You're operating at a completely different energetic frequency than most potential partners, and bridging that gap requires massive psychological energy. Think about what happens when a conscious person dates an unconscious person. The conscious person has to maintain awareness while the other person operates unconsciously, hold space for projections without absorbing them, translate depth into surface language continuously, suppress their actual knowing to maintain connection, process not just the date's content, but all the unconscious material the other person is leaking. Jung called this psychic labor, the invisible work conscious people do to maintain interaction with unconscious people. It's not just exhausting, it's unsustainable in relationship. Before your awakening, this wasn't work because you were both operating unconsciously. You'd meet, project onto each other, and flow in unconscious compatibility. But now you're awake trying to connect with someone still sleeping, and it requires you to dim your consciousness just to maintain conversation. One of Jung's patients described dating after individuation. I went on dates with objectively great people, kind, successful, attractive. But after 2 hours with any of them, I'd come home completely depleted. Not from the conversation, but from the energetic strain of maintaining consciousness while they operated unconsciously. I had to track my projections, their projections, what was actually happening beneath what was being said, all while appearing normal. It was like being the only sober person at a party and having to pretend you're also drunk. The exhaustion wasn't from the person, it was from the frequency mismatch. And Jung noticed this mismatch created a cascading problem. Conscious people would either date down energetically and feel drained, or stay single and feel lonely. Neither option worked, but here's the deeper pattern Jung identified. Highly conscious people don't just need partners at the same frequency. They need partners doing their own individuation work. Because consciousness isn't static, it's developmental. You need someone growing, not someone finished. This makes the pool impossibly small. You need someone conscious enough that you don't have to dim your light, but not someone who's spiritually bypassed into false enlightenment. Someone still doing shadow work, not someone who thinks they're done. Someone individuating, not someone who's crystallized into a new persona of awakened person. And these people, the rare individuals still doing real work, not performing spiritual attainment, are also exhausted from dating unconscious people, so they've also withdrawn. You're looking for each other, but you're both in hiding, recovering from the energy drain of seeking in the wrong pools. Jung's final insight offers hope. Conscious people can't find conventional love, but they can access a deeper intimacy unconscious people never experience. The question is, are you willing to accept that it won't look like the relationships you were taught to want? Here's what Jung discovered about post-individuation relationship. It's not about finding your other half. That's unconscious projection language. It's about two whole people choosing to share space while remaining sovereign, not merging, not completing each other, not filling each other's wounds, witnessing each other's continued individuation. This doesn't look like romantic comedy love. There's no "you complete me" because you're already complete. There's no addictive intensity because there's minimal projection. There's no drama because there's no unconscious material acting out. What remains is something most people never experience: two actual people seeing each other clearly. Jung experienced this in his own complex relationship arrangements. He didn't have one traditional relationship. He had multiple deep connections with different people at different levels. Not from inability to commit, but from understanding that no single person can hold all the aspects of an individuated self. He needed intellectual intimacy with some, emotional depth with others, spiritual connection with others. This scandalized conventional society. But Jung recognized he was modeling post-individuation relationship. Multiple conscious connections, each honored for what it actually is, rather than one unconscious relationship trying to be everything. One of his patients, a man who'd fully individuated, described finally finding compatible connection. "I met a woman who'd also done deep shadow work. Our first conversation had none of the spark I was trained to look for. No projection high, no intensity, no falling. Instead, there was recognition. We could see each other clearly. The relationship that formed was calm, deep, real. We didn't complete each other. We respected each other's completeness. It wasn't passionate in the unconscious sense. It was intimate in a way I'd never experienced." He paused, then added, "My friends think the relationship is boring. They're addicted to unconscious drama. What we have looks quiet from outside, but there's more actual intimacy in our calm authenticity than in all the intense projection-based relationships I had before." This is what's available to conscious people, not the Hollywood version of love, but something realer and rarer. Not completion through another, but companionship between two people doing their individuation work. Not losing yourself in someone, but finding yourself reflected clearly. But Jung warned, this level of relationship is rare because both people have to be individuating. If one person is still unconscious, they will experience your clarity as coldness, your lack of projection as lack of love, your authenticity as weirdness. The relationship Jung describes only works when both people have done similar depth work. This is why conscious people can't find love in conventional places. The love they need doesn't exist there. It exists in the spaces between, in conscious communities, in therapeutic containers, in rare meetings between people who've both walked through the fire of individuation and emerge willing to connect without merging. Let me synthesize Jung's complete picture of why conscious people can't find love. You've withdrawn your projections, so projection-based attraction doesn't work. You've integrated your shadow, so shadow bonding is impossible. Your authentic self emerged, making persona performance unbearable. The energetic frequency you operate at is incompatible with unconscious relating. This isn't your failure. It's the inevitable result of successful individuation. Jung would say, "You didn't become undateable. You became unable to participate in unconscious relationship patterns. These are not the same thing. The loneliness you feel isn't from being unwanted. It's from wanting something most people can't offer. Real intimacy without projection, authentic connection without persona performance, depth without drama, love that doesn't require you to betray your consciousness. You're not too picky, you're too awake. And awakeness creates incompatibility with sleep, even gentle sleep, even well-meaning sleep. You can't love someone into consciousness. You can't date someone into individuation. You can only meet people where they are, and most people are operating from levels you've transcended. Jung experienced this loneliness deeply. Even with his wife, his relationships with other women, his students, he often felt psychologically alone. Not because people didn't love him, but because few could see him past their projections of him. The loneliness of being truly seen by almost no one, even while surrounded by devotion. But he also discovered this. The loneliness is temporary if you stop looking for conventional love and start recognizing the intimacy that's actually present. Not in romantic relationships necessarily, but in any connection between conscious people, therapy, friendship, brief encounters with strangers doing similar work. If you can't find love and you've done the work, Jung would want you to understand, you're not broken. The relationship models you're pursuing are built for unconscious people. You've outgrown them. Your singleness isn't failure. It's a transition period between unconscious relationship and conscious intimacy, between projection-based connection and authentic seeing, between needing someone to complete you and being whole enough to truly see another whole person. Stop trying to force yourself back into dating patterns that require you to betray your individuation. Stop performing personas you've outgrown. Stop accepting connections that require you to dim your consciousness. Stop believing something's wrong with you because you can't find what unconscious people call love. The intimacy you need exists, but not where you've been looking. Not on apps designed for persona performance. Not in bars selecting for projection compatibility. Not through conventional dating scripts written for unconscious connection. It exists in spaces where consciousness gathers, in depth, therapeutic work, in conscious communities, in rare meetings between people who've done similar inner work, sometimes in friendship that honors soul more than society honors romance, sometimes in solitude that feels more intimate than shallow partnership. Jung would say, your loneliness is valid, but it's not permanent. You're between paradigms, past unconscious love, not yet in conscious intimacy. This gap feels eternal, but it's developmental. You're learning to want what's actually available at your level of consciousness, not what you were conditioned to pursue. And the people who can meet you are also out there, also lonely, also wondering why they can't find love when they've done so much work. You're looking for each other, but you're both too conscious to be found in unconscious spaces. The love you'll find won't look like what you expected. It might not be one person forever. It might be depth connections with multiple people. It might be a partnership that looks unconventional from outside, but feels real from within. It will require releasing every rom-com fantasy you absorbed about what love should look like. But what you'll gain is something most people never experience: being seen clearly, loved authentically, met consciously. Not completion, but recognition. Not merging, but deep witnessing. Not losing yourself in another, but finding yourself reflected truly. If this video resonated with you, do me a favor. Subscribe to this channel and hit the notification bell. To dive even deeper into Jung's revolutionary psychology and what it means for your spiritual awakening, click the recommended video on your screen now.